Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how a mountain scene can be painted in a very realistic way. So I'm starting with French ultramarine and burnt sienna, and burnt sienna being a darker orange and orange being a true complementary to the blue. It's going to cancel each other out and they are going to create grays. But here initially I'm going to tone the canvas with burnt sienna to retain the warmth. And now I am going to alternate between burnt sienna and French ultramarine to do the drawing, and I'm mostly doing the line drawing and will be indicating which parts are up front and which parts are in distance. Here I'm doing the drawing in blue, drawing the mountain because the mountains are up in the distance, so it's better to do them in blue because of atmosphere as they appear bluish. And I'm mostly placing other objects in black or brown or darker gray because they're up front, just indicating which parts are very close and not receiving light, and which parts in the frontal section are receiving more light. Now I'm going to show the crags and crevices of the mountain and using blue, and the lighter portions will be denoted by the those sections that are left open, and they will have the brown color that we have on the ground. I'm also indicating the clouds as well, and also some of the lighter shadow sections. Now I've started with the painting itself and using cadmium lemon, titanium white and alizarin crimson along with burnt sienna and French ultramarine. Here I've started painting, but I'm using the titanium white, pure titanium white, and we'll be adding grays to that, and grays will be, as you know, will be made out of French ultramarine and burnt sienna. I'm using a filbert brush because it's rounded and clouds are rounded too, and that indicates the shapes. And I am using some bluish gray color made out of French ultramarine and the burnt sienna to indicate the shadow sections of the clouds. Now I've made a blue for the mountains, and it is being mixed with burnt sienna and titanium white, so it's a grayish blue, and I'm going to use that for the initial block-in. So here I'm going to indicate the basic color scheme of the painting, and it's not going to be indicative of the accurate shapes and the details. It's just the initial color scheme, which parts are receiving what sort of light and what sort of color temperature. And I'm using French ultramarine, but gradually I'll move to cobalt blue because it's a very bright color compared to French ultramarine, and that will help me out to get the accurate colors of the mountain. Here I'm using a blackish color made out of green and red, being direct complementaries, and here I'm using a darker brown, and this is just the block-in process. So the block-in is done, and I'm going to start modeling the shapes, and this part will focus on indicating the correct shapes as well as different color schemes, color variations within shapes. So that is how I am going to do it, and will be focusing on more, finishing the image a little bit more compared to the block-in process. Here I'm working on the cloud section, and I'll be using more variations of gray and also the white, and will also be indicative of the highlights. This is the pure highlight color with a tinge of yellow to warm it up a little, but this is mostly pure white, and I'm going to place the highlights because this painting has clouds as well as tremendous amount of evening light, so it's a very interesting composition. And here I am almost finishing the cloud section, so this is like finished detail, and clouds do not have too much detail, so this is going to be the last sections that I'm going to work on. Now for the mountains, I've started using cobalt blue. It's a very bright color compared to French ultramarine. It's slightly grayish in tone, so I have started modeling the mountain section. Obviously you can see there is some brightness compared to what was put underneath and above. Now I am observing very hard here, and what to put and how to merge them into the clouds, and what is the shape of the mountain. So any of these things like shape, color and values, if they are wrong, it is going to be wrong picture altogether. Here I am also thinking about the abstraction, that enormous abstraction that a mountain provides in terms of shapes. So I am also thinking about that. So any sort of pattern repeated twice, it's going to be a wrong thing for the picture. So again, color, value, shapes and under shapes you have abstraction to think about, because natural life is very abstract. It's not patterned. The mountain up front will be brighter, and here I'm working on highlights on the clouds using almost pure white with a slight amount of yellow into it to warm it up a little. Yellow is direct complementary to violet, and grays are violety in nature. So you can see that to make a successful painting, it's important to understand how the complementaries work, values work, shapes work, and the color temperature. Here this part of the mountain is receiving the maximum amount of light, so I'm thinking very hard how to achieve that abstraction against the parts that are not receiving that amount of light. So here I've changed the color. Notice the way I'm using the sides of a round brush to create more abstraction. Sometimes it's slightly more difficult, but this is the only way that I can think of right now. And here I'm using the length of the brush to create the crevices. You can see some parts are more saturated, some parts are brighter than the other parts, and that is how a mountain looks like. It's not a uniform color anywhere. Now I'm going to use the same principle onto the mountain that is in front of us, the lower section, and you can see how careful I am in placing the marks. Here I'm being very observant about all those four things: abstraction, values, and the color and the shapes all together, because most of the time I'm looking at the shapes. If the one shape is wrong, including the abstraction portion of it, it's going to be a very bad thing for the painting itself. So this is the modeling part that I'm working on right now in the painting, and when this part is over, I'll be working on the detail part, where I'll be thinking very hard and the pace will be slowed down. But here it's slightly slower than the block-in, because here I'm also thinking about a lot of things, and this is a very important phase after the block-in, because I'm going to recreate the reality here, and if something goes wrong, then obviously it won't be looking real. Now I'm using the sides of the brush and also the tip to create some abstracted lighter marks on the foliage in front, and this part is receiving some light. And this is slightly warmer than what we are seeing in the video. Now I had to increase the light a little bit because I'm going to paint the darker section, and this is obviously a little bit more saturated with blues and everything, but you cannot see the color. Now I think I have somewhat moved into the detail phase with this thing. Here I am, increasing the light and focusing on the shapes a little harder than what I was doing during the modeling stage. I'm blurring some of the shapes and adding some color to it, and then we'll be adding abstraction to those thinner marks. I just increase the colors there. Here again I am using the sides of the brush to create more abstraction, and now the thicker paints are going to be useful. Using the rounded palette knife to work on the clouds and increasing the highlights. Now I'm using a grayish color to increase the shadows a little, so that the lighter sections become a bit more brighter than what it was. Too much light is not enough. You need to have shadows to enhance the lights, and that's what I'm doing. So actually the way I paint is more contemplative in nature and trying hard to understand how a shape appears in front of us, and sometimes a particular stroke works, sometimes it doesn't, so I scrape it away. And now I think it's coming together now. Now I'm working on the tree, so we are obviously into the detail phase, and I'm painting the branches, and we'll be working on the foliage as well. So it's better that you start from the trunk section to make the branches, and you can use both the hands. I mean, it's just holding it lightly and dragging it outside. There is no problem with this. I mean, it doesn't look that difficult because I'm using the sides of the brush, and if the pressure is lesser, wherever the pressure is lesser, it's going to create thin marks. Wherever the pressure is higher, it's going to create the thick marks. Now it doesn't look that way, but I'm using a dry brush technique for the pine tree, and using a rounded brush and using the pressure technique. Use the maximum force into wherever it is darker and gradually drag it outside to create the lighter marks. So this is a very favorite scene of mine. It's a Dhauladhar in Himachal Pradesh, and my uncle used to live there, so this is a very familiar scene, and this is from an institute that I took the photograph from in 2006. And today I'm being able to paint this. And this is very beautiful. The area is very beautiful and very picturesque. If you go there in Palampur, obviously you must carry the painting kits. It's a very paintable region of our country. Here I'm using all sorts of brush technique. Here I'm twisting the brushes very quickly to create darker sections in the foliage. Here I'm using twisting motion of the fan brush to create the foliage, and it's very abstract. You can see it is going to look real from a distance, but this is what it is all about. The scene looks realistic, but it's actually very abstract. Now I'm using a round smaller brush to create some details in the foreground. Now we'll be enhancing the foliage a little. Now I'm going to paint a small branch there. All of these things are easy if you understand how to apply pressure onto the canvas with a brush. And that's it. Now I'm going to use a very thin brush to create these grass-like structures. I don't know what are these, but I know how to paint them. So now using a lighter color to create some twigs here and there. These I think are grasses, and using a very thin specially modified brush to create those. This is all about creating a variation of light and dark, this realism, and also a variation between cool and warm colors to make it look realistic. This is from a distance, and the painting, I'm very pleased with this. So I'm very pleased with the effect, and this is the scene that I knew from very beginning. And if you like this video, then please click the like button and also subscribe for more videos, and also check out my website for more paintings, www.kaustavandfineart.com.